What's up, everybody? We're back at it here for another week. We're post Paltrow verdict. We made it through that trial. My voice is still recovering from last week and the weekend. Had a good time. For those of you who follow us on Instagram, you saw some of the activities we did, and I didn't even post any pictures playing pickleball, which was probably my favorite part of the trip with the boys, but appreciate everybody on there with the funny comments. A lot of Murdoch comments on one activity in particular that I posted on Instagram. If you want to check that out, follow us at Tragos Law on Instagram. Thanks everybody for joining me today for another week. A lot of stuff going on. We're going to be discussing it probably before you watch this video on the Sarah Boone Live. We've got that going on. A couple trials starting this week that we're probably going to follow in a little bit of a different way than we have in the past. But right now, as we usually do, when jurors speak out, we listen because we can learn a lot from the jury system when we look at what the jury focused on. What were they looking at? What were they listening to? What did they find to be the most important parts of the trial? What stuck out to them? Because we all watched this together. And I've got 3 clips today to play. And the first one that we play is going to be a short clip of the foreman that spoke about something that stuck out to him in particular in closing arguments. I tweeted about this a little bit. And again, if you want to check me out on Twitter, at Tragos Law. But let's get to this first clip. Hit that like button on the video if you haven't already, because we're going to listen to as much of this stuff that you all send my way. And again, the Instagram, Twitter, stuff like that, those social media pages are great for sending me clips like this. And this is one that you all sent me on Twitter. So let's take a listen to it together.
Again, it's the little things. You know, one of his lawyers in closing statement, in closing arguments, says, "Oh, you know, we were talking about how much we could potentially get for this case." I'm like, "Are you saying that in open court, dude?" I'm like, "Come on, you got to be a better lawyer."
So first off, I don't think the lawyer said one of the first things we talked about when he came to my office was what's this case worth, but he definitely said, Terry asked me, what's this case worth? And we thought that was kind of a weird exchange. And we talked about how difficult it is for plaintiffs' personal injury lawyers to explain and ask for and prove what this damage is that's been done to your client in dollar amounts. Can't put a dollar on someone's life. You can't put a dollar on someone's pain and suffering, but the civil justice system is just that. You have to do the impossible. Nobody's ever going to agree that someone in their life, a loved one or their own life, is worth a certain amount of money. It's not true. Maybe some people would agree with that. But it's really impossible to do, which is why it's an art to try to explain it to the jury, make them understand it, make them feel it, and you do it with your client's testimony. And that's where I believe the ball was really dropped by this team of lawyers on the plaintiff's side. I think they focused way too much on what the defense wanted to focus on and not enough on how Terry's life was affected, how it made him feel, not by brain scans and medical records, but from his own words. When he would get lost in conversations, how would he feel? When he would walk into walls, how would he feel? When he couldn't finish a handyman project, how would he feel? Now, many of you are going to rightfully say it wouldn't have mattered in this case. And I think you're right. I think the Facebook pictures post-accident of Terry Sanderson, to me, showed that this case did not affect him anywhere near what this team was trying to prove. And when you overreach for damages, it makes it almost impossible to explain the non-economic damage that your client has suffered. And it almost felt to me, which I said during closing argument breakdown, that Lawrence didn't necessarily believe it himself. And if you don't believe it yourself, it is impossible to convince the jury of something. And I always say that I have to believe in my case. I have to believe in what I'm arguing. I'm not just pulling numbers out of thin air. I have to believe my client deserves this or I can't try the case. I can't ask the jury for that amount of money if I don't believe it myself, because I've been with my client. I've lived this case with them for years. So how can I expect 6 people that don't know him to give him millions of dollars with a request like that? And starting the request with, well, he asked me how much it was worth and he didn't really answer the question. He's like, well, no amount of money. It's like, but now you're asking him for amount. Now you're confusing the jury more instead of streamlining it and making it easier for them. Let's listen to the rest.
And that's not dissing on anybody's law degrees or anything. I'm like, you can't say, the first thing we talked about was how much potentially money we can get, and then tell us the entire time it's not about the money. It's like, of course it's about the money, guys. We're not here for Habitat for Humanity. Again, it's the...
I mean, so I heard some people talking about, and that's the whole interview, 24 seconds. That's what I got, at least. I heard some people talking about what this guy looks like. It's like Ski Town, Utah. I don't know what they were expecting, but some people had some thoughts about his looks. But to me, I don't really care what he looks like. Listen to what he said. Listen to how he thinks. I would actually kind of like a juror like this. He's like, listen, guys, I hear you saying it's not about the money, but this ain't Habitat for Humanity. We know why we're here. It's a civil trial. And that's why I don't ever say it's not about the money. It's not about the money. I may say my client would much rather take it back than money, which is true in every case I've ever tried. But it is about money, because money is the only thing we have. And I start that in jury selection. This is not an eye for an eye society. This is about money. Nobody's going to jail. And the way I couch it is, my client has been damaged to the amount of a lot of money, and one side has to pay that money. It's either going to be my client who was wrongfully injured. He's also now going to have to pay for these damages, or the person who caused the damages, the person who caused the bill, is going to have to pay it. So there's money involved either way, whether you like it or not. All right, let's get to the second juror that spoke out, and we have 2 interviews for her. I'm going to try to only get the parts that are relevant here in this first interview, which is shorter, and then we will go to her long form interview. But I wanted to get the short interview because I thought she said some things in this interview that she didn't say in the other.
So the whole thing was a little shocking to me.
Revealing she changed her opinion multiple times throughout the trial, but once the case was handed over to the jury, it only took a couple of hours to get all 8 of them on the same page.
Yeah, we did not have to. We did have a unanimous decision.
The 31-year-old saying Paltrow's testimony rang.
Unanimous is big because they didn't have to. They only needed 75% to get a verdict here in Utah Civil Court. But they were unanimous. It seems like they were unanimous from the jump.
True.
Did you find Gwyneth Paltrow's testimony to be convincing?
I did. I think, there was in the back of my mind, yes, this woman's an actress. And, I took that into account. But I didn't feel that she had a reason to lie under oath. She's always in the...
It's funny. They didn't feel she had a reason to lie under oath, but they felt like Terry Sanderson had a reason to lie under oath. And that's the point. Plaintiff's counsel did not convince the jury that this crash, well, maybe they did because they thought Terry Sanderson was at fault. But, using this case as kind of an example isn't perfect because maybe he wasn't a true victim, at least in the way that he explained it. But they didn't convince the jury that either side has $3 million to lose. So both parties equally, if you think they have a reason to lie under oath, it should be equal. But here it seems like they felt like she had no reason to lie, and Terry Sanderson had 3 million reasons to lie. It's interesting how that happens.
Spotlight, so she always has to be honest.
And while she says Sanderson may have convinced himself he was right, he didn't convince her.
He was telling his truth. And I think, unfortunately, some of that has been distorted due to some other factors. But I do think that he did not intend to tell a truth that wasn't his truth.
So people have been saying that a lot lately, telling his truth, telling her truth. That's their truth. And when it comes to the court system, a lot of times political correctness or certain things that we want to do in society don't happen because the rubber is actually meeting the road. So when she says something like he's telling his truth, which they voted was not the actual truth. People don't want to believe in absolute truths anymore, I feel like. But there are certain things that are absolutely true, and there are certain things where decisions actually have to be made. It's not an everybody gets a trophy society or whatever. I hear people talking about that. Some people like it, some people don't. Well, when you're in court, everybody doesn't win. Everybody is not believed just because they swear to it, right? It's offensive sometimes if in society somebody says, I swear I'm telling the truth. If you don't believe them, you're a jerk. But that's exactly what a jury has to do in every trial. And I find it fascinating. And I like it. I like living in a world like that where we are going to get an answer at the end of this trial. And we have to get there sometimes. It can't just be somebody telling their truth if Terry Sanderson is not telling the truth, because it can cost people like Gwyneth Paltrow hundreds of thousands of dollars in attorney's fees, however she paid him, regardless, however much she's worth, whatever. The point is, sometimes, and I think there's a difference between their truth when it comes to an opinion, right? And how somebody feels or what they think, versus when somebody's telling their truth when it comes to an actual factual scenario. Because there is the truth. And that's what the jury had to do in this case. What was the truth?
In the end, she says it was Paltrow's expert witness, Dr. Schur, who really brought home the case.
He's a snow sports expert in many different ways. I think the fact that Dr. Schur could speak to the DIN settings and he specifically studied snow science, that he had a stronger opinion.
Emery also
Very, very good job by the defense. And again, resources plays into this. A lot of people have a problem with that the more money usually wins in these situations because they can pay the best experts. They didn't just get a biomechanical expert or a reconstructionist. They got a snow ski expert. So as specific to your case as you can be, when they drop little pieces like that from their resume and you highlight it in closing, the jurors that are on your side can take that back and fight for your side because you picked the more specific and more specialized expert.
saying those social media photos of Sanderson traveling the world after the accident didn't help.
I think I wrote down, wow, I need to make some more money so I can go travel this way.
That's the fear. That is the fear as a plaintiff's lawyer, that the jury starts to be jealous of your client who's saying their life is ruined and their crappy life with the lights turned off, that they can't live the way they want to anymore, is so much better than your average juror's life. There's no way they're going to think you need money because you've been emotionally or psychologically damaged. They don't think you're suffering when you're living a better life than they are when they're working their butts off and can't travel the world. Now, is that fair? Maybe, maybe not, but it's true and it's reality. And we literally have these conversations all the time with certain clients. Like, you're complaining about this, but you have to realize your average person on the jury has never done this or has never been there. So they're not going to feel bad for you that now you have to do it a little slower or bring a companion with you. They're not going to feel too bad for you about that. And it's important things that these trial lawyers think about before we try these cases.
I wouldn't have thought he was capable of those things based on the picture that had been painted.
And while this case involved a celebrity, Emery says her
And that was, I thought, the biggest part. I thought he wasn't able to do this based on the picture that was painted.
training as a nurse helped her focus on the facts, not the faces, as she made her decision.
I think it's important that the public doesn't just think that this was a win because Gwyneth's a celebrity. I mean, this is based on the evidence. This is based on the law. I do work in medicine, and you have to look at everyone the same. So I think that should apply in the courtroom as well.
We heard that there was a nurse on the jury. I believe that this is her.
Now Sanderson sought $300,000 in damage.
All right. So let's now get to her longer form interview where she digs in a little bit more, expands on a lot more of her thoughts, and we'll get to hear what she thought of other aspects of the case as well. Although I thought those highlights in just a few minutes were some of the biggest points that she made. So I did want to dig into those. But in case any of you haven't seen this 16-minute interview, we're going to watch it together now.
In Park City, where we are talking with juror number 11. She was, Sam Emery is her name. She was one of the jurors, the 8 jurors that decided the Gwyneth Paltrow ski crash trial from yesterday. And Sam, thanks so much. We appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you.
How much was celebrity a factor in the deliberations and the verdict?
I can honestly say that it wasn't a factor. I think it's important, and I think it's important for the public to know that this was our decision, and this is based off evidence. This is based off the law. Everybody has to be looked at in the same way and counted as the same.
And in terms of the deliberations, what was it like in that room yesterday?
I think it was really exciting at first. So we've gone 2 weeks now and haven't been able to talk to each other at all about the case. So
Exciting is an interesting word to describe it as. And I would agree, like, they're ready to get this done. And we'll hear later in the interview about how she felt about timing. But the big question everybody wanted to know, did celebrity play a part? She says no. I believe her. I don't think Paltrow's celebrity was really the reason they decided this case. That's just my opinion.
So I think we were all very excited to finally share our feelings and be able to come to some conclusions and, come with a verdict.
So for 2 weeks, you're with the jury. I mean, the jury is leaving, entering the courtroom. You're talking,
Yes.
but you can't talk about the case.
Correct.
What'd you talk about?
Families, kids, dogs, work, just anything but the case. Basically, we got to know each other pretty well. And I can honestly say my fellow people of Summit County are amazing humans. And I can't wait to get back together with them.
Everybody on that jury is from Summit County.
Yes.
And so when finally you get the jury instructions and you have the questionnaire that's provided by the court, and you go back into the deliberation room, was it a sense of relief at that point that finally you can talk about this to one another?
Definitely some relief, definitely. And I think it was, for me at least, a little bit exciting, like I mentioned, just to be able to hear what everyone else was thinking. Are they thinking the same thing as I am? Or are we going to be in here for 3 days trying to figure this out? Like, I had no idea.
And
So based on it, we're trying to figure out, are they cloaking anything? Are they hiding anything? Are they not hiding anything? But is she trying to say the right things? To me, the way she's explaining it and reacting seems absolutely true to me. She's like, it was exciting because I was wondering, are they thinking what I'm thinking? And if they've been talking about the case the whole time, then she wouldn't be excited. She wouldn't be wondering, what are they thinking? Right. And many times jurors actually do follow that rule because you don't want to be the one juror to break that rule. And you don't know the other 7, 8, 9, 10, however many people are there. You don't know those people. And you don't know if one of them is going to rat you out. And then you get booted off the process after you've missed 2 weeks of work. So they usually do stick to that. And it's interesting she mentioned that here.
And what did you find out very quickly about what the other jurors were thinking?
I very quickly found out that we were in fact on the same page. For the most part, I think everyone had their own opinions, but it just came down to that we all saw the same evidence. We all learned about the same laws, and we just had to come up with a verdict based on that.
And was there ever a doubt at one point as to what the verdict might be? Were there differences of opinion among the jurors?
I wouldn't say there was necessarily differences in opinions. I think some of the jurors had a more difficult time making an opinion at all, really, because it's really hard.
Didn't want to make a decision.
It's really hard to put somebody at fault, right?
100%. And that's why, as the plaintiff, you have to prove your case. You have to explain what the bad conduct of the defendant was. You have to prove it to the point where some people who don't like sitting in judgment or making decisions, you have to prove it to that level to make them feel okay about it. And that's really important. And they didn't do that in this case. The plaintiff side. You're also seeing who I think is a leader juror, the foreman, also seems like a leader juror, probably talking about some jurors that we would consider followers. And they don't want to voice their opinion or be the one to make the decision. But once somebody tells them, this is where I'm at, they're more likely to agree. All of these juror interviews, and it actually makes me feel more confident. I really like it. I'm so thankful for people wanting to talk about this stuff because I would have never watched as much of this if it wasn't for all of you. I would have never listened to all of this if it wasn't for all of you. But this is adding into my bank of research as to this is how it works. This is how people in medicine act in an injury case where there are injuries, treatment, medical bills, medical records. And this is how leader jurors sound when they're talking about follower jurors. Some people had a hard time making a decision, but we all had our opinions and we talked through it and we were on the same page. Because the people that struggle to make decisions sometimes and don't want to be the one to voice it out there will oftentimes be more likely to agree with a stronger personality in the room.
It's really hard to say when you were not there, this is your fault. But then again, we have to go back and look at the evidence and the law, and that's how we, came to our verdict.
Was anybody starstruck?
I didn't get that sense from my fellow jurors. Nobody was really talking about Gwyneth a ton, and I honestly, I don't think so. But we weren't really allowed to talk about the case, so I don't know.
Okay. And very quickly, you reach a decision. I mean, some juries go out for days.
Right.
This jury did not.
No.
Why was it so fast?
I think we had enough evidence, and it really, so 8 days of this was not just about who did this, it's about the damages, right? So all we needed to decide was who's at fault. And I think we had just such a long time to think about it and process the evidence and because we were all clearly on the same page, it only took us about 2.5 hours. And yeah.
Were you surprised that all the jurors were on the same page?
It only took us 2.5 hours. There's been some conversation about how long it actually took them. To me, in a case like this, if everybody believed Gwyneth Paltrow, I am not surprised at all in 2.5 hours. Comparing this to Murdoch, when you have somebody's life on the line, you know how serious it is. There's all this evidence going back and forth. That's different. Here, it was really two people's testimonies. You had to figure out who you believed, and you kind of work backwards from there.
Yes, I was surprised. Because even though you're spending 2 weeks with these people, you just don't know what's in their mind. You don't know what they're thinking. You don't know what they heard. You don't know their experiences. So I was surprised.
Was there for you an aha moment in this case?
I think there was. I don't think I really knew it at the time, but the entire case, I was waiting for somebody to talk about the slope angle of the slope, talk about how skiing works, and somebody who actually knew about skiing, right? Because
that's very interesting. It wasn't just about the injuries. It wasn't just a car crash without a car. They were focused on the fact that it was skiing and everything that comes along with that, which we're about to hear her say.
Because this comes down to it. It's a ski accident. You have to have some background in skiing. So when Dr. Juror came on, I was like, finally, yes, it clicks. It makes sense. There's an expert that's here to testify about what I've been thinking this whole time. Why did nobody's skis release? If it happened the way Terry Sanderson says it happened, why did nobody's skis come off? And that, for me, the whole time did not make sense. But to hear it from an expert was what I needed.
So this was a biomechanical expert witness.
Yes.
And that was key to you.
That was key to me. He has a lot of background in snow science and snow safety, and he could really speak to how much force it would take at which point on the ski to make the skis release.
Okay. So what did you think of Gwyneth Paltrow's testimony?
I thought Gwyneth's testimony, was the truth ultimately. And I think that, I've said this,
and that to me is what it comes down to. If you remember, Gwyneth Paltrow's testimony was before her case in chief started, before Dr. Juror, before any of her experts. So once the jurors believed Gwyneth Paltrow, in my opinion, it was over. It was before Terry Sanderson. And then once they start to believe that, it's easy to add the building blocks with Juror, and where Sanderson may not be telling the truth or may not make as much sense, I should say. It was really Ramon versus Gwyneth Paltrow that they were weighing at that time. Once they believed that, it was going to be very hard to pull them away from Gwyneth Paltrow's side and prove Terry Sanderson was right. So that's the danger in calling the defendant first. If she is a convincing witness, you could lose the case.
You have to take into account she's an actress, but she's also in the spotlight, and she's also got to assume her entire life is recorded. I mean, the paparazzi are, I'm assuming, always around, even on the snow, So the thing is that she probably thought this whole thing was recorded, and somewhere out there it would come out. And I don't think she had any reason to lie under oath. So I believed her testimony. I think it was the facts.
What about Terry Sanderson's testimony?
I think Terry's testimony just didn't make sense to me. I think that was how he believes the accident happened. It just didn't make sense. And the witnesses, his expert witnesses, even contraindicated some of the things he was saying.
It is true. And that was the weird thing about Dr. Boehm, when he would say, like, it had to be turning a little bit, or he had to put his elbow here, and nobody really said that. It wasn't like a square from the back, which is what it seems like Terry Sanderson and Ramon felt like. Flying in the air. No, he didn't fly in the air. Now, the plaintiffs, there's two ways to look at it. You don't want it to be too perfect, because then it may seem like you're lying, which I don't think that's the truth. I think you tell the truth, and if it all lines up perfectly, that's great. And lay people usually like that, like her. She wanted it all to line up. Everybody's testimony lines up the same way. Then it's easier to say, okay, I believe that that's true. But if there's inconsistencies even on your own side and the experts you're paying, to me, that can really cut against you.
Was there a villain in this case for you?
I don't think there was a villain, no.
This was an honest disagreement.
I think
based on two different perspectives.
Right. I think it was an accident. However, I do think there was some fault due to the fact that Mr. Sanderson was out there skiing with decreased vision in his eye. He should have been wearing a skier's vest that indicated people need to stay away from me because I'm limited on what I can hear and see. And I think that's, a lot of the reason I think he's at fault is because that's his responsibility. Because he has these deficits, he needs to let the other skiers be aware.
Did everybody think he hit her?
Yes.
No doubt about that.
There was no doubt about that.
That's wild. No doubt about that. We talk about greater weight of the evidence, beyond a reasonable doubt, No doubt about it. On liability, Terry Sanderson hit Gwyneth Paltrow, which just means they believed Gwyneth Paltrow and not Terry Sanderson and Ramon.
So did you, and when, you're going through this and you've got people who are like, oh boy, this is a hard decision. Maybe they don't want to make the decision. Did you have to bring them around?
No, I don't think that was really the purpose of the deliberation, because we never were at the point where we didn't have 6 people that agreed.
Oh, and that's interesting. So it got to unanimous, but at certain points, maybe only 6 people agreed. So the other 2 were like, either they couldn't make their decision or they're like, whatever, we'll just join you guys because it doesn't matter. And that's how the 75% rule was used to get to unanimity. Interesting.
So these people who were kind of on the fence, I think that they just wanted to hear our opinions. And like I said, it's a really hard thing to blame and put fault on someone. And especially someone who may be suffering from some of the things that Mr. Sanderson was suffering from.
I really appreciate that she keeps saying it's really hard to put blame or fault on someone, because I agree with that. And a lot of the times where we have these cases, car accident, medical malpractice, whatever it may be, a doctor over there that helps people for a living, nice people, everyday people that make a mistake, texting and driving, run a red light, run a stop sign, aren't paying attention, rear end somebody, whatever it may be. They're not bad people. And it's hard for a jury to sit there and say, you caused this, you have to pay this money now. Most of the time, they don't realize it's an insurance company paying the money. Hopefully they do, because 99.99999% of the time, there's an insurance company in the background who's actually paying for this, but they want to make it seem like it's poor little old lady over here that actually has to pay this, which isn't true, but they have a good lobbying, the biggest lobbying resources in Florida.
And I just think that some people had a really hard time, and that's just not what you can't get sympathetic in there. And that was why people were having a hard time, is because I think that they were a little bit sympathetic
to him.
Yes.
And what about to her?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think we were sympathetic for both of them. I mean, we're humans.
A little bit sympathetic to him. Oh, definitely sympathetic to her. It's interesting.
But we can't let that affect us in our decision making.
You're a skier. You ski a lot.
I am.
Okay. I like to ski too. Could you believe that a ski crash led to all of this?
No. And I think that's a big takeaway. And I think it's...
She's a big skier. I think other dude was a big skier. So there were big skiers on there, which is not unusual. And they did not believe that a ski crash could cause such damage. This is a very important thing to think about for trial lawyers, for people, for jurors. Every single juror brings their own experiences into that jury room, and it affects their decision making. It's not wrong, but it affects their decision making. She's a nurse. She's going to bring that knowledge in when she's looking at medical records, whether she likes it or not. She's a skier. She's going to think about all the skiing that she's done and compare it to the animations, to the testimony, to what everybody says happened.
It's going to change things in the ski industry. Even today I was skiing and I noticed new signage up saying stay 15 feet away from everyone.
Today she was skiing right after the trial. And there's new signage up saying stay 15 away from everybody, 15 feet. And she thinks this trial is changing the ski industry.
Wow, okay. So this is serious. And I think a lawsuit coming from a ski accident, I mean, I know they happen. I've never heard of one.
Yeah. And most of the time I've seen them. My son was involved in a big ski accident at
Sorry.
Deer Valley.
I'm sorry.
Woman ran into him and they get up, he gets up, does himself.
My son was in a big ski accident at Deer Valley. A woman ran into him. Pretty interesting. The interviewer saying that.
Off, he answers the questions for the ski patrol. Have a nice day.
Yeah.
Is that the way this should have worked?
I do believe so. I mean, I do think that there was some unique circumstances. She is a celebrity. He was injured more severely than I think he had thought at first. And I think that all plays into...
Seems like she believes he was injured, right? Which is why I've been saying all along, 4 broken ribs and a concussion that did not change his life forever based on his own pictures and activity was the way to go to the plaintiff, because I think that was the truth. And it seems like that's what she believes the truth is. Now, ultimately, it doesn't matter because they all found that he hit Gwyneth Paltrow and he was at fault for the crash. But if we're just thinking about the injury portion, if they could have figured out liability, the injury portion, I think they could have won with just the 4 broken ribs and the concussion. I think the jurors believe that he was injured in this crash based on that statement.
How this just got completely out of control. And I do think that's how it should have gone. I think they should have made, hey, you're okay, okay, good. Like, let's go home. Sorry. Oh, of course. And if you decide to get checked out later and something is wrong, that's awful, but that's kind of part of the risk you take.
Yeah.
Inherent risk. We all talked about it. We all thought it. Owens pointed it out in his opening and his closing. And they were all thinking about it back there in the jury room.
How were you selected as a juror?
So we had jury selection. Let me see, how many Fridays ago was this? I'm not even sure. And we had jury selection and there was 92 people in there, and they interviewed not all of us. They didn't get through everyone. They interviewed a majority of us, and then they told us after a long day, I believe it was like 8 to 5:15, that we were selected, and I was pretty shocked I was selected. I was dreading it, and I kind of did dread it through the process a bit, but I was happy to serve my civic duty, and in the end, I think everything worked out.
But at first you were reluctant. You were a reluctant juror.
I was.
Most are. It's not abnormal at all for people to be reluctant or dreading being a juror.
Oh, I was trying to get out of it. I was.
How are you trying to get out of it?
Oh, I have plans. I have work. The typical excuses.
And did you know that you were being selected for when did you know that you were being selected for this trial?
So they told us in selection that it was Terry Sanderson versus Gwyneth Paltrow. I honestly was like, is there multiple Gwyneth Paltrows? She doesn't live here. This can't be her. I don't know. I didn't think so much of it. And then I guess we learned more about the case when we came, or maybe they told us after selection a little bit. But I had no idea the severity of this case. So
and you knew the name. I mean, obviously everybody knows the name,
right.
but you didn't really. It didn't stick. It didn't register that this is maybe kind of a big deal.
It didn't. I think that was one of the questions they asked me, and I was, do you know about this case? And I said, I think I've heard something, but no, I don't. And I found it kind of unusual living in Summit County that I hadn't really heard so much about it.
Did you? So you're reluctant going in, and you were glad you performed your civic duty, but did you enjoy it?
Whew, some parts I did. Some parts were interesting, entertaining. There was some entertainment for sure. Like I said, I loved the fellow jurors, amazing people. I would say overall, I'm just happy it's over with. I'm happy we came to a verdict, and I'm happy we didn't take a week to deliberate, and I have my life back.
I'm happy we didn't take a week to deliberate. We always think about that. Jurors, after they've been sitting through weeks of testimony, they don't want to waste time coming to a verdict. So they're going to get to the verdict as quickly as they can, I think. Now, that doesn't mean it should all be 2 hours. Some cases you got to read through a lot of material, read through a lot of charges, whatever it may be. But no juror wants to sit there and waste time and make it take longer to get to a verdict than is necessary.
So,
what about the judge and the lawyers?
The judge is amazing. I think we might have a juror reunion, and he's definitely invited. And the lawyers, well, that was the entertainment. I'll just say that.
That didn't seem complimentary. Let me know in the comments. What do you think? Did that seem like she was complimenting the lawyers when she said that? I mean, listen to what she said about the judge, which I agree with her. Didn't seem like she was complimenting the lawyers there.
There was a lot of arguing.
That's a lot of arguing. You're talking about the arguing in court, or you're talking about the arguing among the jurors?
Not between the jurors,
Okay.
between the lawyers, about how much time they were getting, or how many interruptions, or the sidebars. There was just a lot of conflict between them, and it was pretty clear.
Seems like a lot of that was coming from Owens. A lot of the complaining, talking about the time, talking about the interruptions, complaining about the sidebars. Now, plaintiff's counsel was objecting. Plaintiff's counsel was responding. Plaintiff's counsel was calling sidebars. I'm not saying they weren't. But saying that stuff and complaining about that stuff in front of the jury was mostly Owens. I hate that stuff. I hate doing that in front of the jury. And I don't think they like it either. I don't think they like seeing it.
To us, that it was getting out of control there.
It was getting out of control. They did not think that was normal. They did not think that's how lawyers should act or how trials should go. They thought it was out of control. It's not a good reaction from a juror to the lawyers. If I was on this case, I'd be like, eef.
Did you think the lawyers performed well or not so well?
I think they did their job. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't really feel that I can really speak to that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think they did well or not so well? I think they did their job. I think we know what that answer is. And again, if I was getting this feedback, I would learn from it, and I'd be like, okay, I got to go back, watch it, see what I can do better. But I wouldn't be happy. I wouldn't think I did a good job whether I won or lost the trial.
Okay. There was a comment yesterday by one of the attorneys for Terry Sanderson who said, look, the only person who saw this was Mr. Roman. And he was the only witness to this accident. And he said she hit him. Did that matter to you?
I didn't. So we didn't find him to be a credible witness. So there was a lot of,
why not?
There was a lot of factors. So
that was a really interesting, she came right out with it. And that's using the right legal terms based on the jury instructions.
Colorblindness kind of played into that.
Yep.
He said he couldn't clearly tell who was who when they were all scrambled together. He was 50 feet away. He also kind of claimed that he heard a scream and then he turned, meaning he wouldn't have actually seen the collision, which is the same testimony that Eric Christensen gave. And Eric Christensen didn't pretend like he saw it. He said, I did.
She's comparing and contrasting Christensen and Ramon. Christensen didn't pretend like he saw the crash, meaning Ramon did pretend like he saw the crash. They did not feel like Ramon was a credible witness, and they believe Gwyneth Paltrow. That's what it comes down to. Who do you believe?
I didn't see the accident, but I saw the aftermath. and gave all the details around that. And so I think parts of his story were just inserted to kind of bring it together. And it just wasn't credible. And there was a lot of things he said that I didn't find could have been true. The loss of consciousness for 2 minutes and not doing anything. You can't watch somebody lay in the snow unconscious for 2 minutes and not try to get them up.
Christensen was credible.
I believe Christensen is credible.
Okay. These new ski signs that you saw today,
Yes.
you hadn't seen them until today.
I didn't notice them until today.
I see. Okay. They may have been there.
They may have been there.
They may have been there.
Yes.
And this.
And ain't that the truth? Once you've been on a jury, you start to notice some things, right? You notice warnings. You notice things a little bit more that maybe you wouldn't have noticed before because lawyers were just arguing about it for 2 weeks in court.
Do you suspect this is a direct result of this trial?
I would think so, because I think more than ever, we just have to be careful, and you don't know what kind of situations you can get yourself into just trying to have a good time out there on the mountain.
Yeah. Would you ever want to do something like this again? Be a juror in a high profile case with a celebrity that attracts all kinds of attention? Is it something you would relish doing again?
No. I'm hoping this is my one and done. I am really hoping that.
I like that answer too. She's not trying to get famous off of it. She's not trying to make a job out of being a juror. So I like that too. I liked her overall. I liked both these jurors. I think they were fair. I think they were balanced. I think they looked at it. I think they chose based off credibility appropriately. So I enjoyed those interviews. I learned a lot from them. Hopefully you all did too. If you have any follow-up questions, let me know in the comments. Hit that like button if you haven't already, and make sure you subscribe to our channel, because we're going to continue coverage of multiple cases. Check out all of our lives, because that's really what we talk about, what's next and what we're going to handle, when we're going to handle it. So thanks for joining me today. And if you're interested in what our firm does, I'm a real practicing lawyer in Tampa Bay, and you haven't checked it out already, take a listen to the outro. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok at Tragos Law is our handle. And don't forget to listen to the Lawyer You Know podcast, featuring new episodes every week. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, the Lawyer You Know.